Okay, so welcome everyone, welcome state coordinators and also host site supervisors, both new and returning. The purpose of this training is to go over some of the basics that you're going to need to know as a host site supervisor for your members, your interaction with members, and your interaction with myself and the state coordinators, and all of the paperwork that goes along with that. So we're quickly just to go over the agenda of what we're going to talk about. We're going to look at the service hours for your members. We're going to look at the timesheets and how to go through that and approve them and your role as a timesheet approver. We're going to talk about our performance measures. Although our performance measures as a program have not changed in the last couple of years, the way we collect the data and the frequency of communication between members, host site supervisors, and state coordinators has changed, and that's what we really want to communicate to you this morning. We will go over all the documents you're going to need related to performance measures and timesheets and show you exactly where you can find those on our website. So just to start out with talking about the service hours, on this call we have host site supervisors who have members that are both in a half-time and a full-time capacity. So looking at the service hours for a full-time member, it's 1,700 hours over the course of 11 months, and for a half-time member it's 900 hours, and whether that be in a full-time capacity for 6 months or a half-time capacity for the 11-month term. We've divided that up, and we'll go through this in more detail on the America Learns timesheet, but they're direct service hours, so the time spent directly working on the projects at your host site is 70% of their time. We've allotted 20% for member development hours. That includes all the training they receive from Energy Corps and NCAT through pre-service orientation, which they just went through, mid-service training and end-of-service training, and it also includes development hours at their host site and conferences and trainings they go to throughout their term. The last 10% is slotted for fundraising hours. Members can work on fundraising. There are a couple restrictions that are detailed in the member and supervisor manual, which are raising funds to fund their position and fund the host site. In addition to those three areas, we have community service outside of the program, so all the members are encouraged and allowed to do outside volunteer hours. We'll also show where they can log those hours in their timesheets, and that has to be approved by whoever's running that outside volunteer activity. It also has to be approved by their host site supervisor and then goes through the eyes of the state coordinator to make sure they did indeed serve those hours. We're going to go now briefly through the timesheets, and we're just going to go right to, from the supervisor's perspective, from the moment you get that email that your member has submitted the timesheet to what you do after that. So this is just the last slide of the member filling in their timesheet for the 2-week period and submitting it. Once that submittal goes through, you will receive an email, and then you will have the option of viewing the hours and approving them or returning them to the member for any corrections. So there's just a couple steps. It's not very time intensive once you're familiar with the program. It just takes a few minutes of your day. So you'll receive the email notification, you'll log in, and then you'll be able to approve or reject that timesheet, and then you go on with your day. So we'll talk about a few reasons in a moment why you might reject it or return it to the member. And just to go over the timeline of when that happens, all of our members will be submitting those timesheets every 2 weeks. When they're submitted, each state coordinator also gets an email that the member has submitted it, and when they get all of those in, they will be in contact with the members to talk about their hours and also everything else going on at the host site, reflection logs and any performance measures. So we'll talk about the details of that a little bit later. So I will be sending an email to all of the host site supervisors with the web link for America Learns and also your username and password. So that'll be provided to you, and you'll be able to log in. This is looking at your home page for America Learns. The first thing you're going to do is select the second from the bottom on the left where you're going to manage, view, and screen your timesheets. You're going to select the individual member data link. There are a few host sites that have multiple members, but for Each host site supervisor, I believe within our program, everyone will be approving mostly just one member. There are two different ways to view these timesheets as they come in. If you are at a host site and you have multiple members under you, there's an option to fast track and look at them all on one page. I'm not going to be going through that in detail this morning. That's something I'd rather work one-on-one with host site supervisors that have multiple members. So this is very important because we have a couple different programs, the different template names we have in this, and this is actually incorrect. What you're going to select for your timesheet template is 2012-2013 National Program. So all of the members, except for one that we have remaining from the 11-12 program, will be in 12-13. So once you select that, you will see your host site pop up in this list. So you select the site that is yours, and then you're going to select, and this is where you have the option of doing fast track or member by member. You're going to select the member one at a time. So most of you will have just one member that will pop up there. You'll select that member and be able to see their timesheet that they just submitted up on that screen. So it'll show all the timesheets pending approval. Those are the ones that you're going to select and go into approve or return. It'll also show if they're active now in another timesheet period, the sheets that need to be submitted, and that's the next one that's coming up. And at the bottom you'll also see all the approved sheets of the past. So you have the option of going in and looking at any sheets in the past if you want to review any hours or activities during different time periods. When you select one sheet, you'll see this come up. It'll be a bit longer because it'll have every day within that 2-week period, depending on how many days they served, and you'll be able to see, we just talked briefly about their time being broken up to service, direct service, training, and fundraising. So you'll see for each day how many hours they allotted to each of those categories and the total time that they are submitting for that period. In addition to you seeing this every 2 weeks, we have an internal spreadsheet tracking system that all Energy Corps staff have access to, and all the state coordinators, including myself, look at those frequently, weekly if not more frequently than that, to see how their members are doing on hours. So every 2 weeks when these timesheets are submitted, this is a small change that we made in our program. We're really kind of keeping extra pairs of eyes on the hours and looking forward to vacations, holidays, things like that, and wanting to be more kind of in the loop with the member, knowing what time they're planning on taking off and being able to predict, so we're not at the end of their term and we're in a real squeeze for finishing those hours. So at the bottom of the screen you have the option of approving the timesheet, and you have the option of rejecting it. So if you choose to return it, you would have this little text box to explain why, and if you are returning it, that's what the member is going to see. They're going to get an email and it's going to say this is why it's being returned. So host site supervisors as well as state coordinators have the option of returning timesheets. So some examples of why you would return it: if you come up here and you look at the hours and you know they've been active and fully serving for the 2 weeks, but you see maybe 50 hours or less or whatever it may be that's going to trigger, there's hours that weren't reported there, then you would go through and look and see maybe they put too much time for a break or something didn't get counted on one of those particular days and the member didn't catch it. That's when you would return it. Also, we're looking for the members to report how much time they took for lunch. So if you look through and they're not reporting their lunch time for those 2 weeks, that would be a reason to return it and ask them to specify whether they worked through lunch or whether they forgot to report it. Those are the two biggest things. There's a couple other examples. I don't know if anyone has any comments or ones that come up frequently that they want to bring up. If not, we can move on to the next slide. I would mention real quickly there, I've noticed maybe the hours are in the wrong spot. Mm-hmm. So if they were outside volunteer hours and they had them towards their service. So sometimes that could happen. That's a good point. Also, there can become a gray area with training. So a lot of members leave this training and we make it pretty clear that the 2 full days of training and the travel time they have back to their host sites is all included in that training category, but then they have a series of onboarding and training at their host sites, and that's also appropriate to include in training as opposed to the direct service. I've seen that a lot too. So just on this screen, when we went over this with all the members, we talked about what type of description we're looking for next to each of those categories. So they also have a reflection log where they capture all of their numbers, data, and really the bulk and the detail of what they're doing for those 2 weeks. But what we're looking for is we're looking for a description on, in terms of, if we just talk about service, what projects did you work on? How many hours on each project? Tell us a little bit about the project. So when you have host site supervisors and state coordinators go through and look at this, at actually what they were doing and counting hours for, you have a good sense. Training. What training? Who ran the training? How many hours? Where was it? That's when we can pull and kind of aggregate the trainings they went to and share that with members in the future for other opportunities. That's the end of America Learns in terms of host site supervisors' responsibility for approving them every 2 weeks. We know everyone has different schedules and they fall on different days when they're due, but we ask for a 2 to 3 day turnaround with host site supervisors. If you don't get around to it and something else is going on, you'll get a friendly reminder from the state coordinator that they still have sheets pending. Are there any questions about America Learns and approving timesheets?
I have a question about service hours that tied in. With the outside community service, is there a cap on how many hours they can do for outside community service dedicated towards social hours?
That's a good question.
Yes, hours spent performing volunteer service cannot exceed 5% of the members' service hours. So for full-time members, this is 1,700 hours, and 5% of that is 85 hours dedicated towards outside volunteer hours. And for a half-time member, shooting for 900 hours, that's 45 hours of outside volunteer hours. And the state coordinators will keep track of all the submitted outside volunteer hours by members, and then communicate with host site supervisors if the hours are approaching that 5% mark.
The next thing we're going to go, are there any other questions in terms of America Learns? The next thing we're going to go through, is performance measures. In the beginning of April, when we had a few members start, we recorded a webinar that talked about our program's performance measures and then linked on to an audience response system that we're using now called Turning Technologies, and the actual product is Turning Point. And then so this webinar here is an hour long. We have it on our member resources site, and what we're going to show you right now is just 20 minutes of our internal evaluator, Al Kirky, explaining performance measures and what they mean to our program and how that data is collected. So he did a really good job with explaining this. So I want to show it now, but the full hour incorporates a lot more than just this explanation of performance measures, and we've shared this with the members. Some of them have already seen it, but we'll continue that conversation with their understanding and being familiar with this. 125.
Let's get started on the next slide. And waiting for Aaron. Real briefly, by the end of this, everybody should know what performance measures are, particularly those of you who are new. I'm hoping you'll pay particular attention to this. And then how we might go about measuring the two major community service performance measures, which are change in learning and service quality, and what sort of resources are at your disposal to measure change in learning and service quality. And that's what we're going to cover in the next few minutes. Next slide. Here is the community service-based performance measures for Energy Corps. These are right out of the proposal that went to CNCS, AmeriCorps, and this is the standards of performance that CNCS is holding Energy Corps to as it relates to our community service component. And you'll notice that there's two components here, if you can take just a quick read of it. And for those of you who, many of you, this isn't the first time you've seen it. For those of you who are new to this is outlined in what's called the Performance Measure Plan that you'll probably may have received or you'll be receiving shortly. But you'll notice there's an output component that says how many people we hope to reach through hands-on energy assistance and energy education. You'll notice those numbers are different. And then there's an outcome or result part of this that says, okay, of all those people that we've reached, how is their world a little bit different, and how do they perceive the service that they've received if it's hands-on energy assistance, which includes things like weatherization, in-home energy education, and the like. So in the next slide, we break that down a little bit more. Why is this important? Well, I put it in bright red letters. It's for survival of Energy Corps. And really because of a lot of pressure that's now mounting within the federal government, a lot of federal agencies, CNCS is no different than Department of Energy or the U.S. Department of Agriculture or the FDA. Everybody is seeking to determine what the return on investment is. So performance measurement is important to the extent that it shows impact, that you all as Energy Corps members and your host site supervisors get an opportunity to learn from some of the feedback you might be getting and how you might improve presentations or a particular project or program. And then again, how do we share successes not only with CNCS and AmeriCorps nationally, but with each other in terms of some of the stories we tell that show results as well as what we're up to. And in the next slide, we'll see sort of a bigger picture view of this. Really, what Energy Corps is all about is change. And that includes change in learning, change in action, and change in the conditions. In people's world around them, what are some modest changes that are taking place? And the bulleted item I have cited here are just some examples that are stuff that has happened within Energy Corps, changes that have happened within Energy Corps members' experience. What we're being held to, and Aaron, if you can just hit that next key, we'll see if this works. What Energy Corps is being held to is these two items. What the quality of our work really is, who we're reaching and how many and how inclusive that group is, and then change in learning, people's increase in knowledge, awareness, skills, or maybe a change in attitude. And that is really what we're measuring during the life of your work as an Energy Corps member. And on the next slide, I'll show you why. Year one, you've got a 10, 11-month assignment, and it takes a while to get oriented for this. We are really looking at what sort of results can you realistically measure in this span of time. And Aaron, you can just click through it a couple of times here. Because as a practical matter, what people might learn in year one may be something they might not take action till after you're gone, or in your second year of service if you're there. And then even as a practical matter in terms of people's energy consumption at home, their electric bill going down or whatever the case may be, that might happen in year two if they got on the stick and did what you taught them in year one. But in some instances, some of these changes take place over a much longer period of time, particularly those of you who are working in community assessment and community planning settings. You'll find that the results of your work may not be measurable till years after you're gone. That's why we're focusing on this change of learning. Next slide. What you find is you're going to have a lot of demands placed on you for, like, hopefully your host site supervisors if they're doing their job, and with your interaction with Energy Corps through America Learns and some of the reporting requirements that they're part of our landscape now. It's very different than it was 10 years ago. But you'll see there's a lot of things that you're doing, and it's not expected that everything is going to be captured in weekly reporting logs. But there's all this work that you're doing, sort of the stuff that keeps you busy 40 hours a week, and the things that you create, be they newsletters, curricula, stories through social media. You can click it again, Eric. But what we're really aiming towards and what CNCS is holding us to is after you've done all this work and all these things you've created, what is it resulting in from a particular service event that you may be conducting? Have some fraction of that 1,500 people we have to reach nationwide through hands-on assistance, actually have about 80% of them reported that the service they received was of high quality or not. We're 4,000 people reach, be they adults, kids, college students, whomever, and did a significant number of them show some change in at least one aspect of about energy, sustainability, water use, food systems, whatever the case may be. So what is the challenge that many of your fellow AmeriCorps members didn't face 5 years ago is that we have to capture not only what you're doing, what you're creating, but over time, during the span of time that you're an Energy Corps member, how are things a little bit different. Next slide. One of the first things you're going to see if you haven't seen the template already, and this is for the new members, and for those of you who are current members who've been on board since November, you're familiar with the performance measure plan. It's a short document that really is asking, okay, once you and your host site supervisor have sat down and said, what are you going to do? What is your general scope of work here? What will you measure? How will you go about doing that? And we'll touch on how that can be done a little bit later on. Who's going to actually do that measurement or assessment? And that very well could be you. And you'll see in our presentations on Turning Point a little bit, that should be you. And then at what time intervals, and is there any additional costs in terms of time or resources that has to be committed to capture either what people thought of the quality of service or how something new that they learned related to energy, water, food systems, and the like. Next slide. I'd like to cite a couple of examples that might, for those of you who are new, as you're sitting down with your host site supervisor, might help in terms of trying to capture what we're trying to capture. The Energy Coordinating Agency is a big organization with lots of programs in Philadelphia. And one of those programs an Energy Corps member was assigned to called this LICAP program. Well, what they did is they selected, out of the 1,400 low-income households that they served, they selected and surveyed 100 of those households and asked them a range of questions. Well, the points that I raised in, that I have here in red, are two that were germane to our Energy Corps performance measures for this past year. And what they did was provided us the survey results, and then we were able to pass that information on to CNCS. It was a happy accident that about 80% of those who were served reported that service, whether that be in-home education or the educational materials were of high quality and useful. Next slide. Jordan Scheibel was an Energy Corps member. He's been gone for about a year now, but I wanted to share what Jordan did at Imagine Grinnell in Iowa, because it's a pretty good example of how you capture change in knowledge. That is, what did people learn during the presentation? And this is somewhat different, as it's probably been discussed in the training already, that the hands-on direct service tends to be focused more on an individual household, their home, an individual church that might be weatherized, whatever the case may be. Much more one-on-one in its nature. The energy education performance measure is really based on the fact that you're reaching a bunch of people. Let's go on. For example, Jordan had all of these projects in his second term part-time, but the one that he captured as much information as he could and reported those stories through America Learns and some of the numbers as well. But he had these energy awareness workshops that he had to do it. Let's go on to the next slide. Of all the things he was doing, here's one good example. He was focusing on working with utility customers, doing 10 workshops, again, an average of about 10 people per workshop, and he used an existing home energy audit toolkit And let's go on to the next slide. I can get an example of how complex this was. Again, this wasn't sort of rocket science level material that he was presenting, but it was more complex than holding up a CFL light bulb and saying, this will save you energy. I mean, he was taking people through really what some of the issues were in terms of saving home energy at a variety of levels, be that heating and other heating, cooling, and appliance use. Next slide. What Jordan did, and you might have to squint a bit on this slide, is he took all of the topics that were covered in the sessions that he did. And you'll notice below each one, there's a before box, or a before line with a series of check boxes. And what people are checking is actually listed in the upper left-hand corner. And then an after box. And what he did is he had people fill it out before in terms of what they knew about energy audits and all these topics that you see here. And then at the end of the session, had them pull it out, and before they left, fill that out. Now, it's not a perfect world. He didn't get 100% response. Some people filled out the beginning, didn't fill it out at the end. Some filled it out at the end, didn't fill it out at the beginning. But he did gather enough data that we were able to gather or share with CNCS, and he was able to also then adjust his future presentations by saying, whoa, people didn't get it. Maybe I should take this topic out, be that R value or whatever, or change the way I presented that material. So let's move on to the next slide. For you as Energy Corps members, this sort of boils down to this. Wherever you can, again, report results when it's possible, not just the activities, the educational products, or the audience who is served, but really going down to that next level. And in the case of hands-on assistance, we're really stressing with folks, always use the 5-point service quality scale that NCAT has developed. For those of you who haven't seen it, it'll appear in your performance measure plan if you haven't already received that. For those of you who have seen it, it's been simplified somewhat, and that'll be posted to the web. You can use what you have currently, but go to the web here soon, or we'll be emailing the newer and somewhat simplified version for you soon. And for both new members and current members, here's a new wrinkle. On the education side, because of some uneven reporting of results, what we're moving towards and what NCAT is committing to create over the next 4 to 6 weeks is a series of direct knowledge questions in these areas. It's almost as if, imagine these as sort of modules and templates, which will have a short paragraph, instructional paragraph, possibly some graphics, and a series of questions that relate to these bulleted topics: home energy use, renewable energy, recycling, food systems and energy, and then community sustainability. And we're going to be hopefully rolling those out about at the rate of 1 a week over the next 6 weeks for you to use. And really, we're asking particularly that you use them with kids and preferably with adults, although with adult audiences you could use what's called a self-rating, which is similar to what you saw in Jordan Scheibel's. That sounds clear as mud. If you got any questions, by all means type them in and we'll answer them at the end of the session. But again, we're moving towards a more structured approach. So if you are doing a presentation on recycling, please insert at least one of these questions that, and refer to that module in recycling so we are capturing more uniform data more consistently than we have in the past. Go on to the next slide. So sort of what's next and what you can count on. We're asking that within the next 2 weeks, those of you that are new, that you sit down with your host site supervisor and say, okay, knowing that some of this is going to be projections and estimates, what do we anticipate as an Energy Corps member, accomplishing in this next year, or doing in this next year? and then how you might go about measuring some of the change in learning or quality of service data that we're hoping that you'll be able to gather. And again, this is sort of the starting point for many people. It's very new. It's even new for Energy Corps. This is the first year we've sort of been this organized. Then we really, again, want to emphasize as these new service quality, these new education modules and question sets come up, that you use those, and that the 5 service quality questions or indicators you'll always use. Again, they're at the website. They appear in your performance measure plan. At least the service quality questions do, and some of the self-rating questions do. So use those tools as needed. And we're also asking that you contact your state Energy Corps coordinator. That would be Dan, Jordan, or Katie, to if you have any questions before your service event about how those questions could be inserted, which ones you might use, are there alternatives that you could indeed use if your agency, like Energy Coordinating Agency, already has those also. So given that, that's pretty much all I have. I guess we can go on to the next slide. And if you have any questions, by all means, bug your state coordinator. If your whole site supervisor can't be any help, bug your state coordinator.
Okay, we're going to stop it there. I'm going to just build off. I want to touch on 2 things, building off of Al's presentation. The first thing is going to be the work plan. So we've gone through our resources with all of our new members and existing members, but if you go to energycorps.org and go to member resources, this is where all the relevant documents are going to be. So in addition to having them up here, the state coordinators are going to email them to all new and existing host site supervisors, because some of this has changed. But just to start with our work plan, we have 2 options, 2 different templates that different members have used. And they're under the resources section. I'll just pull them up so everyone can see where they are. One is a member work plan. And this is something, and this and the next document we'll talk about is something that we want the member and each supervisor to sit down and complete together, knowing that some of this may change throughout the term. If those changes occur with different projects or funding that comes up, just make sure you communicate that to the state coordinator. So we're giving everyone a month. So by the end of June, for the 10 new members that started on Monday, we want the Energy Corps work plan, and we'll go over this right now, the performance measurement plan, to be returned to your state coordinator. There is one other work plan up here as a template that we've recently added. This is in an Excel format, and the biggest difference is it's just detailed out and it breaks out every month. So we're well aware that this may vary, or it may be in a different form, depending on the host site and any existing documents that you work from and whatever works for you and your member. But for our program's need, to have one of these 2 documents filled out and returned to the state coordinator would be very valuable to our program and something we're requiring. So in addition to the work plan, the second thing we're going to talk about is the performance measurement plan. So going off of what Al just said, we put the performance measurement plan right up here because this has to do with reporting. And so this plan is a 2-page document. It explains, kind of reiterates what Al talked about in the last couple minutes, and then just has some fields to estimate projected number of people served in the 2 categories that Al talked about, one being hands-on and the second one being education. So in this document we include what our program-wide goals are, and so each host site and each project is selected with these goals in mind and how their members can contribute to them. So that's what that is. Al talked about in terms of the hands-on, the 5-point quality indicator of service. So we're looking for the quality of service from all the service recipients. Now, what Al talked about towards the end of that was these modules that we're developing. So this is something that's brand new that's being developed now. We shared this We touched on this with the members that started in April. We've explained this via email to the members who started in November, and then we went over this in great detail with the members who started this week. So when we're just talking about energy education and education in classrooms and to service recipients, we want to move away from the self-reporting indicators and pre and post surveys of change in knowledge. So when they have either, whether it's just one survey at the end of the event or one that's before and after, using that system of, how much did you know before this and how much did you learn because of this presentation. So we're trying to move away from that, and we're trying to move towards these knowledge-based questions. So the 5 modules that Al mentioned, right now you can see on our website we have 2 that are complete and posted. We will finish the 3rd one within a week or so. We're working on a 10-day kind of schedule to churn each one out. And so by the end of the month or maybe mid-July, we should have all 5 of them complete and up on here. So these are the modules. Depending on the projects that the members are working on, we want them to familiarize themselves with, use it as a resource, and use the questions that we have listed in each module for their presentations. And that's what we want to use as a change in learning.
Can I just ask you a question real quick?
Yep.
Did you use any nationally normed tests to develop these instruments?
We talked with our program officer in terms of how this would work for CNCS, and we also talked to other AmeriCorps programs and their tools that they've used, so it's kind of a combination, making sure it's approved from our funders and also with other AmeriCorps programs who have been using knowledge-based questions.
There's at Clarkson University in New York, Dr. DeWaters and Dr. Powers, Susan Powers, have developed a nationally a normed test for energy literacy that can be used for middle school students and high school students. That has 3 components. It has knowledge questions, attitude questions, and behavioral questions, as well as 4 self-efficacy questions. So you might just want to take a look at that and review what you've got here against that. But they've done all the validity and reliability studies on that I think are kind of important for this type of work.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, we'll definitely look into that. And this is also, with this resource page, it's evolving and we want to continue to add to it. So that's something we'll definitely look into and hope to get up here. And I'll be contacting you to follow up on that, Michelle. So thank you.
I've found about, I want to say, 8 or 9 different energy literacy instruments or surveys and tools that have been used with a variety of different audiences, and including some adult ones that are used for adult audiences. So that's what we've used to develop our instruments here, and we've already sent our instruments through IRB at the University of Arkansas to get approval. So I want to see how much overlap there is between the instrument we've created and the instruments y'all have.
Sure. Yeah, that'll be interesting to look at. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
So yeah, I'm at the end of my agenda here. I guess the main takeaway points are the changes in these modules and what's due to us by the end of the month. And that's going to be the member work plan and the performance measurement plan. Each of your new members have been provided with where they are and know that that's a task, and the state coordinators will be following up to make sure they're working on it and they're coming our way. And so when questions come up with host site supervisors and the members, and you're wondering whether, the numbers look right in terms of generating those performance measures or certain activities are able to contribute to the performance measures, just give the host site coordinator or myself a call and we'll work through that. We understand that members are working on a lot of different projects that have different goals, so it's definitely flexible. Are there any questions before we end this call? I want to thank you for coming on and thank you for your patience. We'll definitely be putting additional resources up here as they come up and letting everyone know that they're there and how to use them. But we really appreciate it, and we're really looking forward to a great year of service. So thank you, everyone.